Hi, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Nigel Smart, and we have a really interesting conversation coming up here over the next half hour or so. Uh, Nigel, let's just kind of dive in here. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background and how you came to focus on the pharma industry?
Yeah, I graduated in chemistry in the UK and then went on to get my PhD in kind of fermentation and biochemical engineering at University of Manchester. And that was sponsored by Beecham's Pharmaceuticals at that time. And I worked on novel penicillins, notably the drug that everybody knows today is Augmentin. I actually worked on that very, very early on. And that was my entree into pharmaceuticals. I became a postdoc at University of Sheffield, built a pilot plant, built equipment to grow cells, which was very difficult at that time. And then boom, the biotech industry around 1980 really started with recombinant DNA and monoclonal antibodies. And I was prime placed at that time. And I'd had I was doing a lot of talks internationally. And my parents had both died, and I felt like an adventure. So I came to North America. And as they say, you come for a few minutes or a few years and you stay and you have a great time and you contribute. And that's where I am. So I've had a quite an extensive career, I'm sure we're going to go into a little bit. I've done a lot of different things, grown a lot of different cells, a lot of different expression systems. I built a couple of companies of my own, including the consulting business that we now have. Um, but my passion out of all this is I built a lot of processes, and things that interest me was how do we get more efficient? How do we get more productive? How do we get to high performance? High performance is a bit of a passion, if you like, of mine. Um, I was influenced in the 80s by a book by Peter Drucker called In Search of Excellence.
Yeah,
And I don't think I've ever turned myself back after that. That has spurred me on. I really enjoy seeking out things. About 12 years ago, I published a book called Lean Biomanufacturing, which had a lot of Lean Six Sigma, and a lot of the latest stuff. And that was kind of my frustration that my industry that I'd given so much time to was still stuck in batches, still stuck in silos, and we should have been a lot further on than we are. Like the microelectronics industry, that moved rapidly, but
right.
our industry did a lot of great things, but it didn't move fast enough for me. And so I've been searching and looking and trying to apply with our clients now the latest ideas and coming up with different strategies. So that's been a passion, Dario.
Excellent, excellent. So obviously we're in this massive technological advance here
Yeah.
with AI. We had a really good conversation about this prior to this call, and I know that you're all over it. So where do you think the most significant opportunities are to create value, particularly maybe in manufacturing and clinical operations?
Right. I like to try to take what I call like a whole view approach. I don't like this idea of chopping things up. That I mentioned one of my earlier books that was very much a focus there. I think if you take a whole supply chain approach, which involves right back to the suppliers, the manufacturing unit operations, which leads then into testing. Um, and then into things like packaging and then warehousing and then distribution. I think there's one of the things that I'm, if you like, obsessed with is I like to reimagine or optimize, but then reimagine workflows. I think workflow understanding is very much a key to getting efficiency. And I'm interested in how do we get to high performance? I'm not just talking about being good. We can train and be good, but how do we get that exceptional performance? So one's looking at generating um, workflows that lean out the whole process, but are integrated. We've done a lot of work on, for example, integrating QC with manufacturing. One of the problems in pharmaceutical manufacturing is there's a wait time. You might be for a synthetic pharmaceutical, an API, for example. Um, you might have a wait time be between reactions, and you're waiting for um, data to come back from the lab. And if you don't get it back in a certain amount of time, either the reaction time, the thing goes, aside from losing your uptime in your reactors, which you want to turn around as fast as possible, you're losing time on that reaction. It could be where you need a drying step, and you can only dry for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you spoil the that intermediate. So it's very, very important to be able to integrate things as much as possible. And obviously, with digital capability, you can do that. We've done quite a bit of work on using smart screens so that things that need to go back to manufacturing, for example, can be communicated digitally, visually from the lab. So you can see where the lab is with its analysis of of an IPC, for example, which then alerts the people on the shop floor, hey, we're going to be able to start this thing in 20 minutes or in an hour. And why is that important? You can show for, let's face it, we still have a lot of old manufacturing plants
Yeah. Yep.
around. So what you want to do is obviously maximize the uptime. You can show, and we've done this with one company, where you could actually increase two more batches a year out of the same plant just by having the things digitally integrated. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to appreciate, therefore, that using AI, which is much, much quicker in predicting trends
Yeah.
and things than we are, that you can rapidly eradicate the lack of performance when you implement that in the right way. So if you've got critical performance parameters that you're monitoring, integrating AI maybe into part of the control strategy and monitoring those key performance indicators, you can drive that performance pretty quickly.
Right, 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 right. So you made a point that many pharmaceutical companies, they have long established processes, right?
Right.
So what are some of the challenges? I mean, it seems like integrating AI, would almost be a no-brainer. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen integrating it into these legacy systems?
Well, you make a good point. I'm sure all the audience will recognize the not invented here syndrome, or we don't do it that way, or that's not the way we do things here. I think if you go around any of the, let's say, the established um, larger companies, you know, it really doesn't matter which one you pick. They have a folklore and a style of how they do things. They don't like change. Change is very, very resistant. People are very resistant to change. And so change management now becomes the main resistance point to actually getting all this stuff to work effectively and work for you. And that's the key. It's how do you get the organization to want to use this stuff and be ready to use this stuff? If you don't address the mindset of the individuals and also of the group as a unit, then it's like pushing water uphill.
Right. And is that
You're never going to be able to get there. And so one of the really people don't like change. It's uncomfortable. And
yeah,
what I always tell people is, look, as a change agent, you've got to get used to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I know that sounds like an oxymoron. That sounds
yeah,
like a crazy statement, but you've got to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to have to change very, very frequently. And so AI is a big thing. We're going through a time of exponential change anyway, and now we're going to slap into the mix, so to speak, AI, which is doubling every 90 days.
Right.
Oh my gosh, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with all the extra data that's coming? How do we process it? Have we got organizational workflows that cope with that? No, in a lot of cases. And so the way we're approaching it with people is, look, you need to do an assessment of where you are as a work group to see whether or not you're ready to take this on. And if you're not, then we need to create a work structure and, if you like, a training
Yeah,
environment to prepare you for this gift that you're being given. Let's face it, it's godlike technology.
for
You're
sure.
being given this gift that's going to plug into, many, many areas. Think about QC testing. Think about analysis. Think about things like error and kappas and things like that. Think about documentation. How quickly we can generate the documentation. You have to have the people that are ready to want to take that on. And if they're not, you need to prep them for that.
Right.
Otherwise, like like any other improvement program, it's going to be viewed negatively. Staff on the shop floor, once you get them motivated, they love it. They love taking this on. But initially, you'll get it's a management flavor of the month
Yeah.
idea, and then you'll get resistance. Let me share a little story with you.
Sure.
We were doing this with uh, a QC lab that was failing in a major CMO. Um, and they were having a horrible time. And we remember going in and sharing a plan, and we went through with the management, and then we sat with everybody. There's about 30 or 40 people in the analysis lab, and we showed them what to do, what we were going to do, and how it was going to roll out over the weeks and months ahead. And I remember one supervisor came to me afterwards and said, I don't agree with this, Nigel, but we'll give it a go.
Yeah.
This was on a Monday morning, probably late morning by the time we got going. And by Friday afternoon, he came up to me and he said, I was wrong. I'm on board. I want to be one of your internal champions to help get this message through to everybody else. It was a transformation. And that's what we're talking about, to actually
Nigel,
have,
how did you do that? How did you sort of help him make the trip?
well, we involve them in the day-to-day decision makings. One of the things was, how do we improve operations around the lab? What are the problems? And so you have to look at, what are the low-hanging fruit? What are the next things you're going to fix? And what are the next things would you fix afterwards? We created a plan, if you like, that looks like, I call them a spider diagram. If you can imagine the spider in the middle and then the web. So you have
Yep.
the first ring, the second ring, the third ring. And around the first ring, where the spider is, we gave them easy wins. We gave them these
Yep.
um, opportunities to get quick wins. What does that do? It gives them a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
What do people like? They get a dopamine hit because it makes them feel good and they feel they've had a win. You couple 5, 6, 7 wins together, and what do people want to do? They want to be paid well, but more than that, they want to be heard.
Yep.
They want to do a good job. People want to do a good job.
Yep.
And if you give them enough hits like that, where they can get a relative high, they can feel proud of what they're doing, and they can see now it's improved. The workflow has improved for them at the same time as being profitable for the company. Once you get that, you've crossed over that bridge, and now you're not pushing any longer. You've got a whole bunch of champions that pull for you for the implementation of the more difficult things. So
Yep.
that's just the approach that we use.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So again, I think so are people threatened? I mean, do they feel like AI is going to take their job? Do they feel like, maybe they should be, more informed about it than they really are, and or that the AI is going to take control? What's sort of like really the kind of getting down to the human, where's the fear factor, I guess?
Well, you pick it up on a right good point there. I mean, it is fear. They have to become, what we always call the can-do spirit. You have to be fearless. We talk about what's your stress tolerance? What's your fear tolerance?
Mhm.
We use a tool called the line tool. And if you're familiar with it, but basically it's a cross that has powerful, fragile, anti-fragile resilience, and grade it 1 to 10 on both axes, and you ask the people, where do you feel about this? How do you feel? Do you feel confident? Do you feel negative? Do you feel
Yeah,
fragile? And you
yeah,
find out where people are. So you're taking the temperature in, if you like, in their current state, in their state now. And then you say, well, what do we need to do to get us to, say, if they were a -2, what do we need to do to get them to a 3? I tell people, look, 7 is average, and I want people at 8s and 9s.
yeah.
And so now you stimulate into people's mindset this idea that human beings, what we call the human agency, that becomes the important factor that they need to focus on. Um, Getting over this idea of that as a limiting belief. Um, Again, it's cognitive awareness. It's making sure that they are on board, that they can achieve, provided we put the right tools in place to help them. And that's really the approach that we take, Dario.
Yep. Yeah. Excellent. So, I mean, again, quality control, regulatory compliance, certainly critical in pharma. How does AI implementation affect validation processes, and what approaches have you found effective for ensuring AI systems meet rigorous pharmaceutical standards?
Right. Um, in our industry, we work to exacting standards, and which require qualification in all areas. Certainly, we're talking about validation, which is the qualification of the equipment, and then obviously the validation of the process. The operation in the lab, everything has to be qualified, everything has to be tested. Our stability, our analysis tools all have to be qualified so that they're accurate. We do that against standards. So we're looking at creating standards, and just the same as you would do for calibrating an HPLC system, for example. What we'll have to do with if we're going to use AI to assist us in the validation process, we would develop scripts to be able to assure that when the program is run, it's generating data that's consistent,
Yeah.
just the same as we would as if we were doing it manually ourselves. I want to stress this is the linear machine code capability that AI has. That's really just an extension of us, but they do it like a billion times faster
Right. Right. Right.
and more effective.
Right.
So it's incumbent upon us, just like anything else, to make sure that that's calibrated and tested and reliable. And provided you do that, then you've got a fantastic tool. But there's this myth that AI is going to take our take our jobs, and that's not the case. Um, AI can do things very, very well, as I say, many, many, many times faster than we will ever be able to do now. Even if we had 5 times Einstein's capability, we wouldn't be able to do it as well as AI does. But where our AI is lacking and where our human agency has the advantage is we're imaginative, we're creative, we're going to think, you know, I don't like to use this term, but for lay people and to get their heads around what I'm trying to tell them, you've got to think out of the box. But I don't like that term. I like to think out of what I call the meta box, or the metaverse. You have to think out of a box that you haven't even thought about creating yet,
Right.
because that's much more flexible.
Mm.
That's way beyond anything. And where do you get that? You get that by thinking vertically, by thinking you're having conscious awareness, by using a whole bunch of tools. You get yourself in the flow, which we know as being in the zone. And now we're operating at a level of capability that's maybe 110% and that's what we know is possible in athletics, in physical sports, but it's also possible in terms of our creative thought patterns. And so, many people think that possibly, the great thinkers, the great musicians of the past, the Mozarts and what have you, they probably got into the flow, but they didn't know anything about brain plasticity at that
Right.
time. We have the capability now, and I teach people how to get into the flow because once you access that flow, it's you're into subconscious thinking. Your brain's thinking 5, 6, 7 times faster than when you're consciously thinking because you disconnect your frontal lobe.
Yeah.
And once you get into that mode, we're accessing a totally different sphere of influence, if you like, in terms of being creative. And it's that creativity, Dario, that gives us the capability to be high performance, which is really what I'm trying to get us to.
Right. It's
All
kind of like when you get into that zone, right? And,
into the zone.
and
And
it's
you can program yourself. We can give you exercises to actually help you get there. Um, Look, in GMP operations or in GLP operations, anything to do with, testing, licensing, building, manufacturing pharmaceuticals, we're into good manufacturing practice and lab practice. We're into that realm of things, GXP, whether it's clinical, the same in that area. We're looking at data. We're looking at patient data crunching, statistical analysis. We can harness this AI capability, but what AI can't do is AI can't tell you how or what type of analysis strategy you want to perform. That is the human agency. That's the brilliant side of us. Rather than getting upset, oh, we're never going to be able to compete with AI. Well, we aren't if we do the AI's job. But what we have to do now is detach ourselves and focus on what are our gifts, where are we, and then, like something from Star Trek, we access the things that are incredibly well developed now, and we plug the two together. And now if you want to call it that, we have the creative piece. We tell the machine, this is how we want it to do it. And then the machine computes all the permutations. You can try this out yourselves just using we try to do permutation analysis when we do problem solving, and we use chat GPT, which is super simple for anybody to use, and you can use that to generate permutations so that you have options. Most of them you can say, well, that's never going to work, that's not really good, but it gets you there quickly rather than spending days and having a super intelligent, highly qualified team of people to actually get you to the same point. So that's where, and that's how really we approach things.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, in my world, I'll do the same thing. I mean, I've obviously gone all in on AI, and the tools are changing every day. I'll get in and start whatever, playing with the tool and working with the
Right.
tool. Next thing you know, I'm discovering all the new capabilities and new ways to use it, and next thing you know, like 8 hours has gone by. Like literally, I've been like down the rabbit
Right.
hole for 8 hours, but when I come back up, it's like, oh my God, like almost every week I'm finding new applications and, to your point, ways to do my job better. I mean, when I think about what I do, you know, like 2 years ago, I would have needed 20 people to do what I'm doing today.
Of course, let's pick up on that. You asked me about clinicals. So what are we what are we going to be doing on clinicals? We're going to be coming out with a chemical analysis. We might even be having structural analysis from patients, imaging studies and things like that. Don't you think if you apply AI to the imaging studies using the very, very best interpretive brain, it's going to be much more, not just efficient, but much more arguably reliable
Yep,
than I don't want to say you're run-of-the-mill radiologist in a local hospital, but I think you get the point.
sure.
You can have that as the first line, and then yes, you can still have the radiologist that checks it and make sure that the analysis is correct. Look, machines like us are fallible, um, but the power that that's bringing to what we can do is enormous. The trend analysis that I think is so exciting, whether you're talking about in manufacturing, one of the things that we're in a sterile facility that we're looking at is environmental monitoring. It's expensive. So you're sampling a lot of different places around a facility. You can do a statistical analysis using AI and decide where are the most critical areas, where are the high risk areas, and model it for you. And you could probably cut maybe three-quarters of what you were originally doing, and you can justify it, and you can show that far from being sort of under-resourced, you are so over-resourced now that anything that you would, any human resource that you were previously using, you could now redirect that into arguably a more critical area uh, where that person or that group of resource capability can be applied to something where the AI can't have an impact. And goodness knows, have you ever been in a situation where somebody has said, we have enough resources? There's
No, never,
always there's
never,
always resource,
never.
there's always a resource issue, isn't there?
Yeah.
So potentially now we have the capability to really hack down on the most important things and all this other, I don't want to call it extraneous stuff, but all this stuff that is kind of a no-brainer, we can really put most of that to bed. This is why when I spoke to you before, I said, look, depending on who else you speak to, the estimates are between 60 and 100 billion
Yeah.
a year
Yeah.
across the industry we might be saving. That's enormous.
Yeah.
That's a year. That's enormous. Maybe 25% of that is going to be in clinical. Maybe another 25% of that probably is going to be in R&D. Think about using AI to help you with X-ray crystallography, for example, or these types of, or possibly helping human agency design a molecule that doesn't exist,
Right.
or maybe that hasn't exist in nature,
Right.
that we can use towards an unmet need. And I think one of the unmet needs that I think is exciting is a whole field of neurochemistry.
Right.
That whole area is, I mean, really there aren't any really good drugs. I mean, I know the pharmaceutical companies would probably think otherwise, but there really aren't. Not like anti-infectives, where we're very, very good or have been. Although that's another area that could be ripe for um, new molecules because we have massive resistance and only a few anti-infectives that are um, saving us, if you like, from these mutating bacteria.
Hey, Nigel, what are like maybe I don't know, one or two or three really sort of good takeaways for, whatever manufacturing and quality leaders in the pharma industry, people who you work with, what's sort of some pearls of wisdom maybe that you would leave them with just to kind of again get them thinking about, where everything is going and to embrace that more comfortably.
Yeah, I like to we use a technique which we call is called future back thinking. Future back thinking helps you develop foresight so you can come out with new more interesting strategies going forward. And what is that all about? It's asking a why, what, and how approach to the way you're developing your ideas. Let me best explain that this way. If you were 5 years in the future and you could look back to today, what type of information would you tell yourself? You'd say, Dario, don't go down there, or Dario, think about this.
Yeah.
Don't discount this. When you do that, and then ask yourself why, well, you know why you're doing it, but what are you doing and how did you do that? That, because you've looked back, you've gained wisdom now, and you can apply that going forward to develop a new strategy. So you're looking back to actually understand because we are imaginative, so we can look back and say, gee, if how many times have we said in our lives, gee, I wish I knew now what I knew. I
Exactly.
wish I'd known 20 years ago what I know now. Well, it's that type of approach. We're developing wisdom by um, by asking, why did we do that? What did we do, and how did we do it? And is that now relevant as I look back forward? And the majority of cases, you're going to say no, or you're going to say maybe, and then you're going to ask this question, well, what am I going to do now instead? And that's going to take you down a different line. It's try. I try to tell people to say, look, we're very methodical, we're very logical, but we've got a machine now that can help us with that.
Right.
Use that machine.
Right.
Use your creative powers to think about those things that I've just explained, and then say, whether it's Chat GPT or another AI, ask it questions and say, okay, based on the information I've given you, generate me six permutations
Yeah.
and then test that. I think the thing is, you've got to have conscious awareness of what's changing around you, and then you've got to be adaptive, Dario, to that new environment. But ultimately, like anything else, test, test, test.
Right. Right.
And I think that's the best, that's the best advice I would give. It's develop that foresight, uh, you know, from, if you like, the wisdom of being agile and creative in your forward thinking.
Yep. Yep. And so, what's the best way for organizations to engage with you?
Well, you can get me at Smart Pharma Consulting. Um, on our webpage, there's a consult thing. I'm very happy to have people dial in and book a free consult. You can get me. That's www.smartpharmaconsulting.com. You can call me. You can get me on LinkedIn. We have a company and a personal a LinkedIn profiles on there. Um, or you can call our office. There's always somebody there or a machine that will pass the messages on. Really excited about this.
Oh yeah.
I know companies are struggling with it. We've just done our first program with one of my large companies about 2 weeks ago, and they're having a lot of fun with this idea of, okay, where can we apply this? Um, but where do we need to focus our human energies so that we get the most out of this? So I'd love to talk to people about that. Yeah, our office phone number is 610-422-1097.
Excellent. Well, Nigel, this was great. I mean, incredible wisdom that you shared, and it's just so cool that again, like this enables just so many possibilities, right? And it's just up to us to go out and, like you said, just seize the moment, right? Like look into the future and test and experiment and just start, whatever, understanding the
It's
possibility.
basically it's a little bit like the Pilgrim Fathers going out on their boats and not actually knowing what's at the other side, but
Yeah,
believing that there's something there. It's like, shooting rockets off to Mars. It's that exciting, I think. When you think that if you talk to other futurists that are people that are managing AI at Google and whatnot, um, they will openly tell you that we're going to generate more technology in the next 10 years than we developed in the last 100. That is pretty scary when you think of what human human agency developed between 1920 and
sure.
2020.
Yeah,
I mean, think of all the things that have been developed, including AI.
yeah,
I just think it's a phenomenal time. My advice to people is please don't be scared of this thing.
yeah.
Embrace it. I'll leave you with this because I know time's short. I was I love old cars, vintage cars. I do a bit of vintage racing from time to time with a 1950s car. And I was at one of my car club meetings a couple of years ago, and one of my friends, he was president of our club. One of my friends, his father was there, and his father was just turning 100. And I said, Mr. J, can I have breakfast with you? And he said, sure, sit down, Nigel. And I started to talk to him, and he's messing around with his phone. And I said, Mr. J, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm just, he's 100 years old. I'm just answering my Facebook messages. I said, Mr. J, you're doing Facebook messages? I said, you've seen basically the car, the aeroplane, the
Oh yeah,
TV, the
telephone.
movies, the
Mm,
world wars, the jets, the moon landing,
incredible.
computers, and all these things in your 100-year
Yeah,
lifetime.
yeah.
Why are you messing about with this? What's your secret? It was motherhood, what he told me. But coming from a 100-year-old man who has probably seen more technological change than anybody,
Oh, for sure.
one human being in a lifetime going forward, he just said to me, Nigel, accept everything, absorb everything, don't resist, enjoy it, because you cannot stop it. Don't, and I said, you mean like there's a King Canute sitting on the beach waving back the waves? He
Right.
said, exactly. He said, it's here. Whatever it is, it's here. He said, embrace it, don't resist it, and you'll do just fine. And I said, thank you so much. It's so simple, but I think that's the type of mindset that we all need. Um, are we going to make tons of mistakes? Of course we are, but that's part of the fun, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I hope these ideas, I don't know if they're pearls or nuggets of wisdom, but these are the things I would share with people.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nigel. It's really great.
Thank you for the interview.